Got a great talk from Jeff Liebl here, a three-time CMO. He's going to speak on data-driven marketing, the view from the CMO suite. Jeff has been a CMO at three companies over how many years? Probably
14, I guess.
Yeah. One in the Bay Area, Ubiquity Software, and two here in Minnesota, eBureau, a predictive analytics company, and Digi International, a public firm here in the Twin Cities. So Jeff brings a unique perspective because of his time, particularly marketing and selling predictive analytics services. So take it away, Jeff.
Great.
We're looking forward to it.
Thank you, Graham. Is my mic on? Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Well, thanks for being here. We've got a pretty good crowd here still, Graham. 3 o'clock. This is pretty good. Well, thanks. Before we get going, I just wanted to take a quick poll. How many of you work in the marketing department? Okay, now keep your hands up, please. How many of you have analytics or maybe BI or something like that in your title, if you have a title? Okay, so a lot. Okay. How many of you work for a company that has less than 200 employees? No, I mean from that group. We're still kind of fiddling it down. From that group of, you're in the marketing department, you have an analytics title, and your company is less than 200 employees. So 1, 2, 3, okay, not too many, okay. I'm hopeful that's going to change over time, actually. But anyway, we'll get there. So what I'm going to do with this session, we've got, I promised Graham we'd get this 3:25, so I don't have a lot of time to cover this. There's been a lot of really action-packed sessions, a lot of information. I'm going to keep this kind of high level and let you kind of walk me. We can't walk a mile in a VP of marketing or CMO shoes here because we don't have enough time, but we can maybe 50 yards, kind of give you a perspective on sort of a day in the life or the things that have preoccupied me in these roles over the last 14 years, and kind of where, from my perspective, with a few observations, some perspectives, some musings, maybe a little rant along the way, kind of where data and data-driven marketing kind of fits into the sort of survival scheme of the role. Here we go. And so just a little background on me. Graham, you already filled in. What I want to actually do is, and partly why I asked that question, was because I want to do it in the context of an emerging growth or a mid-sized kind of mid-market B2B technology company, because that's kind of the connective tissue of all the businesses that I've worked for and kind of the battles that I've fought in that context. And a lot of the kind of connective themes, the common themes around these companies have been complex sales cycles. So sales departments tend to be a lot larger than the marketing departments because they're high touch. The sales cycles can be 6, 12, 18 months long. Oftentimes, definition of business success is 100 or 200 direct clients, right? It's not the pursuit, the business success is not the pursuit of 100,000 or 1 million clients. You might only have a couple hundred that really define the business and achieve profitability, and then perhaps there's a long tail in the process. So these are some of the things that have been kind of common. I kind of want to look at this with that lens in mind. This is simply a random picture of my dog Finn. I decided to. You like him? Everyone loves dogs, right? I decided to skip the Dilbert cartoon and just show my dog Finn. He's neither a marketer or an analytics dog, but he thinks he's very much human. So anyway, that's Finn. So here's some things that have kind of been assigned to me that have been on my plate, the front burner agenda items, things that my past CEOs have said, this is what your performance objectives, this is what you need to be breathing and thinking about. This is what your performance objectives are going to be based on. These are the things that we're going to talk about together in quarterly board of director meetings. And let me just talk a little bit about each of these. None of these should be a surprise, by the way. So brand identity. So very important, even in B2B, mid-sized technology companies, it's essential that the business, and I've been had the luxury or the ecstasy and the agony, shall we say, of launching 2 new brands to market, as well as refreshing to corporate brands, as well as refreshing and relaunching 2 aged brands to market. And it is essential, and a lot of sort of small to mid-sized B2B technology-oriented companies often struggle with are really effectively articulating their brand identity, right? Especially if it's a complex solution process, it's maybe been an engineering-driven organization. Does the company have a clear, do people know why they should buy from that company? What is their fundamental brand promise, right? Is there a common messaging platform that's been developed that articulates its value prop to its end customers? Are all the employees, do they know that? Are they all singing from the same hymn sheet? Or is it simply a kind of ad-libbed cacophony of different mixed messages going into the market? This is a big topic, and most CMOs, even in mid-size B2B technology-oriented companies, are going to spend a chunk of their time, and certainly I have, making sure that that brand promise is clear to the target markets we're going after. So next, product marketing, another big front burner agenda item. Now, some companies, product management, product marketing fits under the marketing department. Others, it's separate. Sometimes it falls under engineering. I don't necessarily usually recommend that. But if you have product marketing in your responsibilities as the head of marketing, you're going to spend a lot of time dealing with it. In particular, if you're selling not one product, but maybe you have to handle tens of thousands of SKUs, store keeping units, right? And so you're preoccupied with things like, well, do we have our market segments defined, right? Do we have the right priorities in our feature sets on the roadmap? Do we understand our competition? Do we have the right pricing? You got to have all those things in place to be effective. And once you kind of the brand and the product marketing pieces seem kind of well lined up, that's when the demand gen you can really crank it up, right? Through that's the P of the 4 Ps, the promotion, right? You can drive a lot of demand through various channels, inbound, outbound, et cetera. You can build things like your Serious Decisions demand gen waterfall methodology and drive lots of revenue, hopefully revenue pipeline that's very measurable, right? And so those typically are the 3 biggest things that in my world have preoccupied my time in these different roles. And what sometimes falls out of that is this new, it's not that new anymore, but an area called sales enablement. So when you think you're doing all these things right, and you're driving all this pipeline, then suddenly you hit the bottom of the pipeline. It's like, why isn't it closed won? Why is our closed won rate not quite as high as we think it should be? What's going on here? We thought we knew the brand identity well. We thought we had the products, the features, the prices, et cetera. We're doing all the marketing qualified lead. We've defined the BANTs, the budget authority, need timing. We shook hands with the salespeople. They said, why aren't we closing more business? And then suddenly you create initiatives around sales enablement because, well, clearly we need to give the right tools and the tablets with the cool, and they can answer the questions right, and have all these things at the fingertips to create that excellent prospective customer experience so you can increase your close won rate. So typically sales enablement becomes another headline or priority that in these types of companies, and the ones I've worked in anyway, tend to fall and be responsible by the marketing department. And then finally, of course, resources, and your CFO does not want you to spend over the budget, especially if you're a public company, I've learned. And you also, it's not just budget resources to do all this stuff, but it's not just financial, but it's skills. You have to have the skills and recruiting the kind of talent to do this as well. So if you noticed on this, there was nothing in here that said marketing data or marketing analytics. That wasn't a word in here. That's not something that typically comes up regularly with in your quarterly board meetings. It's these things that do. How's the demand generation? How's the close one? Those are the things that come up in business. So the business goals typically are these. Marketing analytics, however, and marketing data really, it really permeates all of these things increasingly. It has in the past. That's not new. We've always, if you remember doing the focus groups and you do telephone surveys, before the digitization of everything, there was always data in these areas that you could grapple with. But what's happened is data has so infiltrated now all of these areas that it's inescapable. It's embedded within every one of these things. And it's not just demand gen, it's even within brand, there's lots of data-driven elements. Every time we close a deal, that net promoter score survey gets flinged out of Salesforce and goes straight to that customer, right? There's always data being captured now increasingly across all these headline or business objectives. So what then happens is you're the CMO and you have a Marcom director, and you got a director of demand gen and PR person, and you've got maybe a sales enablement guru, and you got your product management person, and we all start creating all sorts of KPIs, right, for our stuff from all this data that we're now capturing. So we've got cool dashboards here you get all these metrics: share of voice, click-through rate, cost per lead, conversions. All this stuff suddenly starts hitting the CMO's plate from all your reports, right? And this is great. And they go, well, how can I explain this stuff at the next executive team meeting, because they don't know what any of this stuff is, right? Or why is this relevant to even have a slide or two in the board meetings, because they don't get this stuff either. So then you start creating cool dashboards, right? And you mash this stuff up, and you got Google Analytics in here, and Salesforce coming in here, and marketing on them. You're creating all these high-level dashboards like this one over here. You give them cool names like the Global Demand Center, and people captures the imagination of your fellow executive team members, and the board guys think it's cool. And in fact, I can see this one here was created by a guy in the audience right there, Michael Weber, who actually, not only can he squat 550 pounds, but he can build a mean dashboard that I can show my board of directors too. So you get all this stuff, and then what? So the question becomes then, well, how did I get all this stuff? Well, I got all this data. We've got some enthusiasm and excitement around it, but where did it all come from? Well, data comes from technology, right? And so I give props to Scott Brinker, who had the same slide. I'm not really looking forward to the next version, if in fact is going to have even smaller logos, because this is really kind of unbelievable. But there's so many of these that it creates a new category of identity and security access software. Like that's why you need Okta and one login. And so there's a whole Gartner quadrant just on those to manage all of these, right? And so a guy like me will get calls every day, cold calls every day, emails every day from people trying to sell me on one of these. And I rarely ever respond to them because I'm way too busy to do it, right? And so you have all these, and so suddenly your marketers are all becoming, whether they realize it or not, whether their title is demand gen manager or content marketer or whatever it is, they're becoming, whether they realize it or not, increasingly they're becoming technologists, right? And so how am I doing for time? Okay, good. So as an aside to all this, who owns the budget for all this software? So if you're in a mid-size B2B technology business, it's not so clear. So, and it becomes sometimes, and so Gartner came out a few years ago with a statement that they said, a report said, the CMO will have a larger IT budget than the CIO by 2017. And CIO magazine not that long ago said, yeah, that's what's happening. And so what that means is you're in this sort of interesting dynamic with your CIO as the CMO. It's like, well, who's going to pay for what here? Because the CFO's all looking at our numbers, and so it becomes sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and you got to eat it, right? So fortunately, in past lives, I haven't had to pay for Salesforce.com, which is really good because man, that gets expensive when you grow. You all know that. And I got somehow marketing Marketo paid for by somebody else, although in a previous life I had to pay for Pardot and HubSpot. But last time I got them to pay, somebody else to pay for Marketo, which was cool. But then I had to pay for my own web content management system because the home-brewed monstrosity that was built internally to host our website and e-commerce was so bad, and the guy who built it had left, and I had no way to support this thing. I needed a commercial one, but that wasn't in the CIO's budget, so I had to eat that. I had to find somewhere. So there's constantly sort of this give and take around who actually is going to pay for this stuff. So it begs the question, you found the money one way or another, hook or by crook, to buy all this technology that you've decided you need, that's created all this data that you're now being inundated with. And it begs the question, do I need, or anybody running a marketing department, do they really need more data today? And I would add, and you can call me a heretic, but I would say no, we don't need data. I don't know if you guys remember this. This was the E-Trade, or recognize this. This was the E-Trade commercial from the Super Bowl. It's made a lot of top 10 lists, where it was about the guy who has money coming out of the wazoo. You remember that one? He's got one. And he goes, does he have insurance? He's got money out of his wazoo. Remember that? So it's one of my top 10 anyway. And I have an E-Trade account, but not from the ad. But so the point I'm making here is that we've got data coming out of the wazoo, right? I don't need more data. I get 200 emails a day from people, and a third of them have an attached file that has data that's important. I don't have time for all this. Who has time for all this, really, right? So, so then the question becomes, if it's no, okay, but, there's always a but he or she, the CMO, they do need the right data. They don't need more data because we're already swimming in it. We're already swimming in more data than we know what to do with. But what we need is the right data. And how I think about what is the right data is in that it's got to be data that you can very quickly transmogrify into an actionable insight and make a better business decision. If not, then it's going to be deprioritized, frankly. And there's so much, the signal to noise ratio now is just getting worse, right? As more and more data, more and more of these 2,000 cloud SaaS products that are so easy to just sign up for and turn on, you know? It's not even a CapEx decision. It's like, let's just play with it, right? The signal to noise ratio is not getting better, it's getting worse. And so my view is you need to become much more ruthless around your prioritization of determining what data really matters. And because if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority. And for me, it goes back to sort of what is that, is there a one, and how I've evolved to this is there kind of one key marketing data-driven metric that I want to be kind of the top, that everything needs to kind of lean up to? Is there one? And I would argue, for me, I've come to the conclusion there is. The one sort of ring to rule them all is return on marketing investment. And this definition here is I think, a good one. It's the contribution of profit. Keep in my mind, profit, not revenue, but profit attributable, which is another loaded word, to marketing, net of marketing spend, divided by the marketing invested, or risk. Risk is a great CFO term, word. And so why I say that is because profitability versus risk versus revenue is important, because at the end of the day, you're trying to answer and make better business decisions around things like, what is the most efficient way to profitably grow the company? And emphasis in profitably, because that's how you sustain. Now, you know, in early days of Salesforce and their playbook and things, you could look at, you know, early startups, you can look at over 100%, you know, cost of sales and marketing costs relative to revenue, because you're creating long-term shareholder value. I get all that, but that's the exception to the rule. And so at the end of the day, you have to put that in the context of what can the business bear cost-wise to bring on a new customer too. So if your gross product margins are 92%, how much revenue you need per marketing and sales dollar is different than if you're selling some sort of commoditized widget at 35 points of gross margin and you have 20% channel and direct sales costs, right? So if you come, hey, I generated $7 of revenue for every $1 marketing, in that latter scenario, that boat don't flow, right? And so it is really got to be oriented around profitability. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to do at the business, at the C level, at the executive level, and the board level, is what is the best allocation of resources? How do we distribute it across the departments? In a board meeting, I had a board member, and they always seemed invariably to be finance guys. And he came and he looked at me, and he looked at the head of sales, and he said, guys, we can only afford a 15% sales and marketing expense to our revenue, which means you guys, but we want to grow faster, which means if we give you an extra $1, you have to generate at least $7 more in revenue. So what's the best way to do it? And of course, the natural answer to that is the marketing guy says, well, just spend it on marketing. And the sales guy says, oh, well, just give me another headcount of sales, right? But it's never that easy. But with all the data, with the digitization of everything, there's a tremendous opportunity for marketers to drive that analysis and that discussion. What is the incremental, the best, smartest possible decision we can make incrementally to profitably grow the business going forward? So another side, kind of an aside I want to add to you on this is, what game are we playing here? So it used to be, there's always been data-driven marketing. I mean, there's companies here in town like Fingerhut that figured this stuff out long before everything was on the internet, and there's been data-driven marketing, however, I think has gone through a transition. It's a different sport now. It used to be what I would call more like American football, and where there was a lot of starts and stops, right? A play gets called, it goes into the quarterback or somebody coming into they're in the huddle, they call the play, they go to the line, the ball gets snapped, the play happens, the dust settles, okay, people look at the outcome, 2nd down and 7, okay, call in, stop, go back in the huddle, call in their play. That sounds a lot like, we're doing the seasonal catalog mailing, right? I mean, that's kind of, it's American football, but the game has changed. And so now, to me, it's much more like the rest of the world's football, soccer. I have a mentor of mine who's a British CMO, and he's on Facebook. Every time he calls, he's an Americanized guy now, and so every time he calls international football soccer, he gets completely just crucified by his British friends who call him a sellout and everything. But anyway, that's an aside. I think it's really become much more of a fluid, back to the discussions from this morning's sessions, an agile, fluid, continuous motion game like soccer. And I think the athletes that you hire in marketing departments, you need to realize that, and they need to realize that. And so in any event, I wanted to share that kind of observation with you. And then share some other final thoughts here, and we can open it up for questions. I told you I'd keep this high level. So one of the best college professor I had at business school in Ann Arbor, Michigan, was a guy named C.K. Prahalad. And he passed away recently, unfortunately, but I got lucky to be in his class. And one of the concepts he coined was, and he wrote an HBR article that was published on this, called the core competency of the firm or of the corporation. And to me, I don't care if you're a small or mid-sized B2B technology company. I don't care that 20 customers define your business success. If you're building a marketing department today, data-driven decision-making needs to be a core competency. It needs to be built into the DNA. Now, whether you define each role and every function that way, and you hire that mentality into each of these different demand gen, public relations, trade shows, if you drive that discipline within each of those, or if you create a role like, there's more director of sales enablement titles out there on LinkedIn now than there used to be. You could create a dedicated role of a director of analytics, maybe, that kind of oversees and brings all this together and creates the glue. There's a lot of ways to do it, but I'm convinced more than ever that you cannot get away anymore with the old way of doing marketing, even in these sort of smaller to mid-sized B2B firms that are heavily oriented around sales, complex sales cycles, et cetera, that you will get your lunch eaten. And it'll be easy to measure it. It'll be easy to show that you're getting your lunch eaten. So, final thoughts. So for those who went into marketing because they were bad at math, the joke's on them. And normally I'd say the joke's on you, but this is the MinneAnalytics crowd, so the joke ain't on you, it's on them. It's on them out there. So anyway, thank you for your attention, and I'll open it up for questions. Thanks. So.
I was talking with a couple people earlier that the one maybe session that isn't here today, and it reminded me of a course I took in college quite a long time ago, was how to lie with statistics.
How to lie with statistics.
Yep.
There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics.
Right. And it was a fascinating course, and they give it to journalism students to question everything. Now, this was in the early 90s. There was far less data available then, and they were making the point that it's very easy to pervert the numbers and lie with it. Now you have more data, and obviously more scrutiny and more confusion with it. I mean, in your experience, is it happening? Is it easier? And how do you really keep the numbers honest?
It's a good question. And I think there's everyone, it's human nature. People, and it's not marketing specific, in any function, people will manipulate data to serve their interests, right? And so at the end of the day, there will always be ways to manipulate data. But for me, you know, there's an integrity issue, right? And at the end of the day, if you're in it for the long haul, and this isn't a finite game you're playing, but it's an infinite game you're playing in business, philosophically, you know, you're going to do the right thing. But certainly, there's a lot of self-serving reports and data analysis out there, and I don't think that's ever going to go away, just based on human nature. Other questions?
Jeff, what kind of actionable insights are you getting out of your NPS survey?
Mixed bag. Mixed bag. In my last company, it was already been decided to implement it, and I'd say not nearly as much as I was hoping. I don't think I would have made the decision had I been there a little bit earlier, actually. I think it's actually good for a pulse to measure a customer support and customer sat organization. I think it's quite relevant for them, and that's where we've found the best audience and kind of use and ways to, you know, kind of follow up on an individualized basis is through that organization, because they're the ones in part who've embraced it the most too. Yeah, sure.
A question over here. I found it very interesting that you were saying that there's too much data out there. From the standpoint of Digi International, is, you know, where you've worked, is arguably creating novel sources of data. Like kind of it's in a way it's kind of creating this new data that didn't exist before. Like,
yeah.
Hey, there's a truck and we know where the truck is, and previously we didn't. So it's sort of creating this new data. So I'm just wondering if you used this ROMI argument, the same thing that you used to judge your own business, if you use that to sell to your customers too, if your customers look at ROMI.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and I would go back even, you're right, the Internet of Things is very quickly, and I get all fired because I'm preoccupied and infatuated with the Internet of Things at the moment and new ventures around this. So, but that will move very quickly, the number of things connected to the Internet, from about 10 billion today to 50 billion in a handful of years. And it's a whole different class of data. All those sensors, all that sensor data has yet to be even fully mined and to figure out where the predictive signal is in that. So that is a $1 trillion megatrend that is about as exciting a thing right now going on as I'm aware of. I would actually go back a step into an experience I had with eBureau, which is a predictive analytics, real-time predictive scoring service, and that's exactly what we did. So we sold an ROI. So the last group had a discussion about online education. So I know a frightening amount about marketing for-profit and online EDU, and in part because we sold many, many millions of dollars of predictive scoring services to online education company marketers. It was purely on an ROI. It was a pure ROI sell. They were buying $100 million worth of cost per leads from third-party companies like Classes USA and All-Star Directories and all sorts of companies, third-party. They're paying $40 a lead and getting a 2% enrollment rate. So that means it's $2,000 per new student, which that's okay. That's the economics of online education can sort of bear that. Other companies it's $200, and other companies it's $20,000, right? But the whole idea was how I could go in and pitch a value prop that says you're going to pay me $2 million a year to score all your leads in milliseconds and tell you which ones not to buy, is going to save you 10 or 15 or 20 million in bad leads that will not enroll because the logistic regression model says so, and all the training we did and all the validation we did proved it. That's what you're selling. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Great. All right. No.
How do you see the evolution of executive management working through the combining of digital marketing, sales, now moving into customer service, product delivery, and arbitrating those various interests as more and more things become integrated and digitalized?
Boy, that's a heck of a question. How much time do we have? I think I'll give you sort of a very quick reaction to that. I think I immediately think of customer experience is what I think of when I think of that. How do you, at the end of the day, in what's no longer a transaction in a finite game of business, but more of a relationship and a customer experience in an infinite game you're playing out over time, how you kind of triangulate all those things together to make that CX that was on the slide here next to the UX comparison. That's kind of how I react to what you're saying, but happy to chat some more about that longer. All right.
I think we kind of reached the end of the road.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks.
I hope we'll see you at the IoT Fuse event in April.